separate jurisdiction. This action formalized the presence of the Catholic Church in the new country of the United States.
That same year, the new state of New York repealed the colonial-era law prohibiting Catholic priests from residing in New York. With the anti-priest law repealed, the French consul Hector Saint-Jean de Crèvecoeur organized a group of laymen in 1785 to open St. Peter's Parish in Manhattan, the first Catholic parish in New York City. The congregation purchased the land for the new church from Trinity Church. Supplement community donations included a gift of 1,000 silver pieces from King Charles III of Spain. The St. Peter's Church was dedicated in 1787. Its worshippers included Sister Elizabeth Ann Seton and the philanthropist Pierre Dusson. In 1800, the congregation opened a school at St. Peter's, the first Catholic school in New York. On November 6, 1789, Pius VI raised the Apostolic Prefecture of the United States to the Diocese of Baltimore, headed by the first American bishop, John Carroll. For the next 9 years, Carroll was in charge of the Catholic Church in New York State, along with the rest of the nation. The second Catholic church in New York State, and the first outside New York City, was St. Mary's Church in Albany, New York, founded in 1796. On April 8, 1808, Pope Pius VII erected the Diocese of New York and 3 other dioceses, taking their territory from the Diocese of Baltimore. He simultaneously elevated the Diocese of Baltimore to a metropolitan archdiocese and assigned all 4 new sees as its suffragans. Here's a little vocab for you. An episcopal see is a noun. Its definition is a diocese or territory over which a bishop rules. Pope Pius VII assigned all 4 new sees as its suffragans, including the entire state of New York. Pius VII appointed Monsignor R. Luke Conklin, then serving in Rome, as the first bishop of New York. However, he was prevented from sailing to New York by a French blockade. On Carroll's recommendation, Conklin appointed Reverend Anthony Coleman, rector of St. Peter's Parish, to administer the diocese as his vicar general. Coleman traveled extensively throughout the new diocese, celebrating masses and providing sacraments to individuals. In the meantime, Conklin died. Conklin died in Italy in 1810, having never made it to the United States or St. Patrick's. His final resting place is now in the sacristy of the Church of San Domenico Maggiore in Naples, where a sepulchre tombstone celebrates his memory. There is also a small altar with inscriptions in English and Italian dedicated to Conklin inside the church. In the interim, the administration remained in the hands of Father Coleman. It was during the tenure of Father Coleman that the first St. Patrick's Cathedral would be dedicated and built. Anthony Coleman soon realized that the city's growing Catholic population needed both a second sanctuary and a cathedral for the first bishop, and started construction on the original Cathedral of St. Patrick in Lower Manhattan. The site he selected for the new church was being used as a cemetery for St. Peter's and was well outside the settled area of the city, surrounded by farmland and the country houses of the rich. At a meeting held in the vestry of St. Peter's on May 24, 1809, the trustees passed a series of resolutions. The first, which was that the church's new name was in honor of the patron saint of Ireland, St. Patrick. The French architect Joseph Mongeon designed the new cathedral as one of the first Gothic revival churches in the United States. Joseph François Mongeon co-designed New York City's City Hall with John Macomb Jr. Construction of the cathedral was ongoing when the cornerstone of St. Patrick was laid on June 8, 1809. Construction took just under 6 years, with the sanctuary being dedicated on May 14, 1815. In the same year, John Connolly, an Irish Dominican friar, arrived in New York City to take office as the city's first resident bishop. When complete, the church was the largest in the city. Its outer dimensions are 120 by 80 feet. The inner vault is 85 feet high. The early decades of the 19th century in New York saw the robust growth of the Catholic Church. Between 1815 and 1842, Catholics increased from 15,000 to over 200,000. As the Catholic population significantly increased, so did its people's worldly needs. In addition to starting new churches, Bishop Connolly founded an orphanage, and it opened in a wood-framed building at 32 Prince Street, across the street from St. Patrick's, in 1817. Not long after the orphanage's opening at 32 Prince Street, a Catholic school commenced operation in the same building, the second such school to open in the diocese, St. Peter's Free Catholic School being the first. So, while I was doing the research for this video, I was really curious what 32 Prince Street was today, and I found out that it's actually condos, which is kind of weird that anyone would want to live in an old orphanage. But it's New York, so. But what I actually found really interesting was when you go on their website, they have this really weird, this is the website for the condos if you want to buy them, and they have these big photos. I mean, I dug through a lot of photos, so all of this is alleged, but I could not find any photos that look anything like this. First of all, you have this one from 1900. Okay, you have a little here's a little random story I found out about St. Patrick's Old Basilica before St. Patrick's new cathedral was made. So in 1838, the cathedral was the location for the funeral of Lorenzo Da Ponte, Mozart's primary librettist, who had fled to America in 1805 fearing bankruptcy. He became a professor at Columbia University and started what eventually became the Metropolitan Opera. The funeral was attended by an enormous number of people. When he died on the 17th of August, 1838, at the age of 89, Da Ponte had not only survived Mozart by nearly 4 decades, he had also outlived his wife, both his brothers, and his 2 children. An overflow crowd of mourners packed the funeral at Old St. Patrick's Cathedral on Mulberry Street. Clement Moore was among the pallbearers who carried his coffin to the cemetery behind the church. Da Ponte was laid to rest beside his beloved Nancy. A decade after his death, in 1838, Da Ponte's gravesite was moved from Manhattan to Calvary Catholic Cemetery in Queens. His remains, however, have yet to be located. Although there is a memorial marker there in honor of Da Ponte, no trace of either his or Nancy's grave has ever been found. Much like Mozart, Da Ponte's remains vanished. Outside St. Patrick's Old Basilica, there is a fairly new plaque dedicated to his memory. It was dedicated September 24th, 2023, to the eminent poet and playwright, pioneer of Italian language and opera in the United States, cherished parishioner of this basilica, whose funeral mass was held here on August 20th, 1838. 1834. This was an era that witnessed a marked increase in violent opposition to Roman Catholicism. An Ursuline convent in Boston had been burned to the ground by a nativist mob in 1834. Similar anti-Catholic outbreaks took place in Philadelphia as well. The trustees of St. Patrick's Cathedral directed the commencement of a substantial brick wall around the cemetery and the church campus. The wall's purpose was to protect the cathedral from nativist attacks. These nativists were called many things: the Native American Party, or simply the American Party. But they were commonly known as Know-Nothings, and they had a familiar refrain: real Americans should come first. The Know-Nothings thought Catholicism was the ally of tyranny, the opponent of material prosperity, and the foe of thrift, the enemy of the railroad, the caucus, and the school. They spread conspiracy theories that the Pope was bent on taking over the United States through a continuing influx of Catholics controlled by Irish bishops, obedient to and personally selected by His Eminency himself. At the same time, many anti-Catholic Gothic novels were published, including one by a disturbed young woman named Maria Monk, a Protestant girl who had been converted to Catholicism and was allegedly forced by nuns to do things with priests, and gave birth to babies who were baptized and killed. The book and others like it were fake news. And many people knew these stories weren't true. Despite the book being debunked, nativist anger at the story resulted in a decision to attempt to sack Old St. Patrick's. In 1836, The original cathedral was the subject of an attempted sack after tensions between the Irish Catholics and the anti-Catholic Know-Nothing nativists led to a number of riots and other physical confrontations. Loopholes were cut into the church's outer walls, which had just recently been built in 1834, and the building was defended from the rioters with muskets. Afterwards, the ancient order of the Hibernians established its headquarters across the street from the church. The Ancient Order of the Hibernians are an Irish Catholic fraternal organization. Members must be male, Catholic, and either born in Ireland or of Irish descent. Its largest membership is in the United States, where it was founded in New York City in 1836. Martin Scorsese, who grew up in New York and who attended church and school at St. Patrick's, made a movie about the Know-Nothing nativists and the Irish immigrants. It's called Gangs of New York, and here he dramatizes these events and more. As you can see, here are a group of people defending what looks like St. Patrick's. After a little digging, this wasn't filmed in New York, but this is supposed to be St. Patrick's, and the Catholics are defending the church against the sack of the Know-Nothings. Pretty cool to see this dramatized. Martin Scorsese was an altar boy at St. Patrick's, so there must be a lot of love for the community and its history. You even see a character named Priest Vallon, played by Liam Neeson. He is based on John Joseph Hughes. But who is this John Hughes? Well, he's a very famous lad indeed. You see, John Hughes was the very first Archbishop of New York. But that's not how he started. John Hughes was born June 24th, 1797, in County Tyrone, and his family faced enormous religious persecution. A defining moment for the young Hughes occurred when he was 15. His late sister was denied a Catholic burial due to an English law forbidding Catholic priests from entering the cemetery. All little John could do was sprinkle a handful of dirt upon his sister's grave. His family emigrated to the United States in 1816. After arriving in Pennsylvania, John made several unsuccessful applications to Mount St. Mary's College in Emmitsburg, Maryland, where he was eventually hired by its rector, John Dubois, as a gardener. During this time, he befriended Mother Elizabeth Ann Seton, who was favorably impressed by Hughes and persuaded Dubois to reconsider his admission. Hughes was subsequently admitted as a regular student of Mount St. Mary's and was ordained a priest in 1826. His first assignment was in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, the city of brotherly love was lacking that love when it came to the Catholic population. Here, Hughes came face to face with anti-Catholic prejudice. As the 18th century had progressed, more Irish Catholics had arrived in America. Being unskilled, uneducated, the Irish were regarded as second-class citizens. Hughes fought back, writing frequently to newspapers, insisting that America was for all people, not just Protestants and the educated. The Irish he defended came to love the priest, and his stature grew when he publicly debated a prominent Protestant clergyman. This notoriety brought him to the attention of Rome, who saw Hughes as the best candidate to assist Bishop John Dubois in New York. Bishop John Dubois, who was now sick, elderly, and and being French, not very popular with the predominantly Irish Catholics of New York. John Hughes arrived in New York City and was ordained coadjutor bishop in 1838. When Dubois died, Hughes automatically became Bishop of New York. By 1850, New York was America's largest city. The number of Catholics in the Diocese of New York had increased to 200,000. As a result, several additional dioceses were created in New York State. And in recognition of the city's growth and importance, Pope Pius IX made it an archdiocese, and John Hughes became its first archbishop. Now, Hughes had a reputation that preceded him. He was called Dagger John, which not only referred to the cross he drew after his signature, but also meant he was a man one did not cross lightly. When anti-Catholic rioters in Philadelphia planned to come to New York, Hughes put up armed guards around the Catholic churches. Then Hughes warned the mayor that if a single Catholic church was burned in New York City, the city would become a second Moscow. The city of Moscow was burned to the ground by its own citizens to prevent Napoleon from using the city as winter quarters for his army. Whether Hughes meant what he said or not will never be known. His threat was taken seriously enough by the city leaders to force the rioters to cancel their rally. After these battles, Hughes became the best known, if not exactly the best loved Catholic bishop in the country. His combative personality, eloquent defense of the Catholic Church, and unyielding effort on behalf of the Irish Catholic poor cast him in a national light. He was a fierce supporter of Americanism, assimilationism, and patriotism. Among his many admirers and friends were James K. Polk, James Buchanan, Henry Clay, William Seward, and ultimately Abraham Lincoln. Hughes was to transform the outreach of the Catholic Church in New York to one specializing in the needs of the immigrant poor. During the Hughes episcopacy, the number of new parishes increased by 53, and a first-of-its-kind Catholic parochial system commenced operation. Additionally, more immigrant aid organizations, Catholic hospitals, and a Hughes-sponsored bank, Immigrant Savings Bank, started fostering thrift and savings. In support of the massive number of destitute Irish immigrants viewed with suspicious contempt in nativist quarters, Hughes battled anti-Catholic and anti-Irish bigotry with a ferocity unparalleled in American Catholic Church history. As early as 1850, Hughes determined that the growing Archdiocese of New York needed a large cathedral to replace the older cathedral in Lower Manhattan. And in 1853, Hughes announced that he had hired the firm Renwick and Rodriguez to design a cathedral on Fifth Avenue between 50th and 51st Streets. The construction of the bridges and the railroads to connect Manhattan to what later became the city's other boroughs, and the demand for domestic servants caused the Irish to scatter throughout Manhattan, Brooklyn, and what is now the Bronx, to live near their work. The area which the old cathedral is now located is called SOHO, Nolita, or Little Italy. It was once known as the Five Points. In 1858, the cornerstone for St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue was laid. On October 6, 1866, the old Cathedral of St. Patrick's was almost burned to the ground by a great fire. A fire destroyed the interior of the old cathedral. The old cathedral was rebuilt and reopened on St. Patrick's Day in
also aided in their assimilation in the U.S. because they were familiar with the general culture, because of its similarity with English cultural norms and institutions. The poor, newly arriving Italian immigrants had greater difficulty assimilating on arrival or even blending in. Without sufficient English language skills and not understanding the culture, integration was not as important or accessible to the poor Italian political refugees of the 1850s. As a result, Italian immigrants of the 1850s clustered among their own mutual support and protection. As early as the 1850s, you begin to see in the American press references to Little Italy's in the 5 Points. This is not, however, a reference to Italian immigrant communities, but rather a reference to certain tenement houses within the 5 Points, which were rented and occupied by Italians. These overcrowded tenements were usually occupied by Italian men from a given region or town in Italy. As such, they were quite close-knit little male clusters, but not neighborhoods or communities, in the sense that we use the term today. The area where St. Patrick's Old Basilica is no longer called the 5 Points, but was and has remained Little Italy. The church has become home to many Italian New Yorkers and has been heavily featured in Italian-American media, films, and television shows such as The Godfather, The Sopranos, and Gangs of New York. In 1859, a gingerbread Gothic chancery office building was built at 266 Mulberry Street. The building would later become St. Michael's Chapel. St. Michael's Russian Catholic Church of the Byzantine Rite was established in 1936. This is the first chapel to serve the Russian Catholic expatriate community in New York, which fled the Russian Revolution. The church remained a part of the community from 1936 until 2019. St. Michael's is the last Russian Catholic church in New York City and was one of only 4 remaining such sanctuaries in the United States. This is St. Patrick's Youth Center, also known as the Aula, encompassing 4,000 square feet of Mulberry Street history. The once youth center is now the new destination for private events, musical performances, technology summits, art happenings, and film shoots. Nestled within old New York brick and mortar, there is a stage and a studio available for rent here. While I was doing research for this video, I found these really cool photos. Some of them are from 1975. Some of them are from 1978. So you see the church, you see the old orphanage / luxury condos. These were pretty cool finds. I wish I knew the photographer's name, but I couldn't find it. Let me know if you know. Comment it down below. I couldn't help but notice this beautiful building across the street from Old St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is the 14th Ward Industrial School of the Children's Aid Society. This Victorian Gothic structure was designed in 1888 by Calvert Vaux, co-designer of Central and Prospect Parks, and George Radford, donated by John Jacob Astor, always used to be there. Here we have the umbraculum or ombrellino, which is made of cloth in red and yellow, the colors of the city of Rome. In the Middle Ages, it was used to protect the Pope from inclement weather when he visited the basilicas of Rome. The basilica's ombrellino bears four coats of arms, its own and those of Benedict XVI, Archbishop Dolan, and the New York Archdiocese. This was, I believe, given to the church when it became a basilica. Here we have the beautiful pulpit that you'll have to take little stairs to get into, and you can see the staircase behind it going up to the bell tower. And here's really the star of the show. When you look at the altar, right behind it is this just incredible stained glass window with the dove of peace right in the center, and when the sun comes through, it's just remarkable. So beautiful, and has all of these intricate decorations. There's another great view of the organ. When it plays, it's incredible. Here we are outside the church itself, and there, look at this, guys, look at this. Here's St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, look what's behind her. Guys, it's the orphanage. It's the luxury condos, guys. Do you guys see the luxury condos? Oh, I'm sorry, I mean orphanage. And look, they're the luxury condo people. I mean orphans. sorry if I'm talking too much about that point. Here, this really cool sign that says St. Patrick's Gold Cathedral. I love the typeface, and some remembrances here. Here are again some of the old stone walls that I have been told are original, and a little view out into the cemetery. I can see some of the graves here. I wish we could walk around more in them, but this is okay. I'd like to be respectful. But yeah, here again are some of those original stones. I just love seeing stuff like this. It really connects you to the past. And these great Gothic windows out to the graveyard. It really is beautiful in here. I really urge you guys to come check out St. Patrick's. There are also crypts underneath St. Patrick. There's like a walking tour that you can go on. I've been on it, and it's very interesting. If you watch this video and you got anything out of it, I'd really suggest going. I mean, you get to see a lot of people we've talked about graves. It's candlelit. You learn a lot about the cathedral, and I think that they might be some of the only like crypts in New York, since it's not really an underground city like Paris or Vienna, because you know there's so much stuff going on underground, just subways and skyscraper frames. So I highly recommend that. Here's another view of the graveyard. This is interesting. I feel like I've walked past this 100 times and never noticed that it says Mulberry in the wall, which is really cool. And then, yeah, here is actually leading down into the crypt. They have it illuminated at night, and it's right in front of the cathedral, so you can't even miss it. And yeah, one last shot of the graveyard. As you can see, these people have been rested for quite a while. But yeah, that's I think that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Please let me know if you like this. I want to do another one for St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue. So